Welcome into the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. You knew that. And you figured it out because you're smart. It's also the name of the show, and I missed all of you. Abracadabra, I want to reach out and grab you. Maybe not. I maybe can't say that anymore, but here we are. Hello, friends. It's been far too long. In fact, it's been so long that I almost forgot how to do this. I forgot the quasi-intro to the show. I took all my stuff to New York last week because I was like, I'm going to do a show while up there for work. For those who are unaware, I think Kincaid talked about this last week over on Crossing Broadcast, but the company that bought Crossing Broad, XL Media, they then sold to Sport Radar. So now I'm an employee of Sport Radar. And I got to go up to New York for a few days. Had a bunch of meetings with some of the European bosses and some of the European tech people and some of the North American side. So we're feeling very good. We're feeling very, very good about what we're going to be able to accomplish over there on a professional level. And so I took my stuff up with me, and I was like, oh, I'll have time. I'll definitely have time to make sure that I can do a show on a Tuesday. That was my plan last week. Genuinely, I was like, I'm going to go up there. I'm going to do a show. I'm going to do it. I'm going to take everything with me. So I did. I tore down the studio. I took all my equipment with me. And then I got up to New York, and it was like, oh, these meetings start early, and these meetings go into the evening, both days. Well, the second day, we split up. We had half the crew went to the Knicks game, half went to the Nets game. I got to go see Barclays Center. A week after, I got to go to MSG, courtesy of Caesars. And so, anyway, been doing some travel here, which is nice. But man, it is good to be back in the home studio. It is good to be back with each and every one of you. I saw people debating basketball prior to going live. For whatever reason, and I'll figure this out, the comments that are in the chat prior to going live now, like they disappear as soon as I go live. I don't know why it's happening. I have a hunch. I'm going to reach out to the company to figure out why I'm losing that. It doesn't matter. I'm happy to be back here with all of you. I am not happy to come back to the shit show at the OK Corral that is the Philadelphia 76ers, which we will get into on today's episode. We will also touch on what's happening with the Philadelphia Flyers, who, despite some turmoil, despite some injuries, despite having to go to their backup and even their third-string goalie, have gotten sizable, significant play out of their netminders. We'll get to that as well. And oh, by the way, the last time we spoke, which was now almost 2 weeks ago, I said, does Eagles-Cowboys matter that much? We didn't even get to talk about that game. And now we didn't get to talk about the Commanders game last week, so we're going to catch up. But the Eagles are in very strong position. It's interesting because a few weeks ago, we go back like a month and a half, we were saying the Eagles kind of looked like a bit of a dumpster fire. The Flyers looked like a dumpster fire. It was like, Philadelphia 76ers, please save us. That has not come to pass. We're going to get into all that, and I will go out to the comments as much as I can today because I've missed all of you so much. But here we are. Let's see. I don't want to jump all the way into the basketball talk. We'll go here. Joe Papel with a good morning. JH says, got it right on time. Ford says, let's go. And asks, who's the clown on the screen? That's me. Hi. I'm the clown. It's me. Lots of people getting excited this morning. Andrew Fawcett with a morning all. Steve Miller, apparently. Let's see. Oh, Ford. Andrew Fawcett says, Russ is now a Russian asset. Yes, I've actually, my name has been bantied about to be part of the cabinet. I'm not saying which cabinet. It might be the presidential cabinet. It may be the cabinet in my kitchen. We got the kitchen redone. Maybe it's one of those. Am I a Russian asset? Очень приятно, меня зовут Russell. Gotta watch out. Gotta watch out. Ford notes that I grew up in a middle-class family. I saw, I'm not going to do it. I'm not doing it today. I'm actually working on an RFK impression, though. I'm actually kind of glad. If nothing else, I had a really hard time trying to work on a Kamala Harris. But, like, I've actually started working on an RFK now. And, like, it's pretty good. Like, it's not perfect, but it's pretty. I might do it later in the show. Maybe I'll do a conversation between Donald Trump and RFK later. Maybe we'll get there when the show goes fully off the rails later. But I can do it. It's actually pretty good. Ford says the team that should be 2-12 is the Flyers, and yet they're 8-9, and the Sixers are 2-11. What a shit show. Yeah, I have to tell you guys, from being up in New York for a few days, I removed myself from some of the pain and the misery that is being a Philadelphia sports fan currently. And it's not that I wasn't paying attention. It's just I wasn't sitting down to watch the games in their entirety. I was catching up through highlights. I was catching up through social media. And it is demoralizing to watch what's happened to the Sixers. But we're going to get there very soon. Chris Freed checks in over on YouTube and says, Sixers need to build a kennel instead of a new arena. Yeah, I mean, if this doesn't turn around, good luck getting public sentiment on your side. I mean, it's one thing when you piss off Chinatown, which they'll probably still get 76 Place built, but like, it's one thing when you piss off Chinatown with the idea that like, oh, you know what, it's still going to be a hashtag blessing to have the Sixers at Market East because everybody loves the Sixers, and the Sixers are going to have a wide window here of title contention. And even though many of the players that are on this team won't even probably be in the league by the time the new arena gets built, it's still a cool idea. Yeah, not 2-11, but we're going to get into that. Andrew Fawcett says, let me summarize. Sixers should tank, but won't. NBA is full of individuals. The game was better in the 90s. I have to be really careful. You guys have to remember, my frame of reference, right? I was born in 1990, okay? I remember some of the Michael Jordan Bulls teams. As a little kid, nobody in my family cared about sports. So I wasn't a Sixers fan in like 1995 and 1996. I also don't really remember Allen Iverson's rookie season. I remember becoming a Philadelphia sports fan, although you could also root for the Pittsburgh teams, but we're not going to talk about that, somewhere around middle school. So I definitely remember the heartbreak of the Sixers losing to the unbelievable Kobe and Shaq Lakers. That's about where my Sixers fandom started, I think. It might have been a year or two before. I don't have like core memories that like take me back to anything before then. But as I've said many times on the show, the Sixers are the ones that pull at the heartstrings. They're my connection with my Baba, who's passed, and so I like kind of keep up the anger for her. Like if a Sixer misses their free throws, like I get angry on her behalf, just like she did with Andre. Well, not quite as bad as she did with Andre Iguodala. She hated Andre Iguodala at the free throw line. I don't know what the hell she would have done if she ever had to watch Ben Simmons. Thankfully for her, she never had to. Ford says, dead serious when I say the best thing now would be for the Sixers to tank. They won't. They will finish around 500, but should tank. And we're going to get into the math of this because I was debating this last night after the Press Row show with somebody who doesn't really keep up with basketball that much and was going to go put himself on TV and make a case that was inaccurate. And thankfully, he has me to save him from himself. I'll let you fill in the dots, but it was Anthony. The tanking idea isn't the worst thing in the world, and everybody's excited about Cooper Flagg, but, like, I don't see a scenario where it happens. The Sixers might just tank unintentionally. This might be like a Chuck Fletcher special. They might just legitimately be that bad, which is crazy because I think the supporting cast is actually okay. I'm going to keep going to these, and then we'll dive into the actual Sixers analysis here because we have to kind of do, you do a post-mortem. You can't do like a current mortem. I mean, the team is still alive. You can't just like cut them up. I was going to make a joke here, but I'm not going to. We'll keep going. JH says, regarding the Flyers goalies, we certainly didn't get sexy Alexei last night. I actually disagree. We'll talk about sexy Alexei. I'm not saying that ever again. But we will talk about Alexei Kolosov a little bit later. Andrew Fawcett with a very good stat of the day. This might actually win stat of the day. Jake Paul has more wins at AT&T Stadium than the Cowboys. Correct. I think I saw the stat this morning. The Cowboys have now set an NFL record. They've, after losing last night to the Texans, Dallas has trailed by 20 or more points at home in 6 straight home games. The show's going to be all over the place because we have so much to catch up on. When the Eagles played the Cowboys and they like curb stomped the Cowboys and everybody was like feeling great about it, I actually felt a little bit bad. I did. I know I shouldn't. Like, I know I'm supposed to hate the Cowboys. Like, I get it. But we did talk about this. Like, I don't think the Eagles-Cowboys rivalry is quite the same as it used to be. I actually felt a little bit bad. Like, it felt like watching somebody from varsity go and, like, beat up on the 8th grade team. Like, that's what the Eagles-Cowboys game felt like to me. And in fairness, like, the Cowboys just aren't a well-constructed roster. Now, is it fun to watch the Eagles blow them out and go pick up their first win in, what was it, 7 years in Dallas? Like, yeah, it was great. But by the second quarter, I was ready to, like, call it a day. Now, I watched it. I kept up with it because I planned on doing the show. But, like, I like competitive games, especially division rivalry games. I like games that come down to the final couple of possessions. That's what excites me. Watching your team go blow out the opposition is great. I'd rather be in person. Like, I'd rather be F-bombing somebody in the stands in a rivalry game than, like, sitting on my couch. There's no one. Who am I yelling at? I have no one to yell at. What am I going to yell at the Cowboys through the TV? No, I don't do that. No, you might. Your drunk uncle might, but I certainly don't. At some point, I was just like, this just feel bad, But Dallas stinks. We don't like Dallas. It's fine. Let's see. We got some political stuff in here. We'll skip the political stuff for now. I don't need like half the audience tuning out because they get upset. Although I will tell you, I'm very glad that the election's over. It has been nice to go back to having stupid commercials and like useless commercials, and now we're getting Christmas commercials. I'm just glad to not have to see any of their faces anymore. I'm so happy that I don't have to like answer the question that the 9-year-old asks like one of the last days of campaign season. What's an abortion? I'm like, we're not doing this. And I think I covered this on another show. If you're one of the people out there who's like, you should tell your kids about what an abortion is when they're 7 or 5. Like, fuck off. Like, genuinely. That's just, no, we're not doing that. What's a rapist? Nope, we're not doing that. We're not having that conversation. Not with a 7-year-old. Certainly not. Absolutely not. I'm glad that those ads are off my TV. I'm glad that my kids aren't asking, what does it mean if somebody votes for Trump or votes for Kamala? I'm glad I don't have to watch Dave McCormick and Bob Casey commercials. I find it very interesting, if nothing else as a neutral observer. Somebody sent me the thing last night that apparently Governor Shapiro has now told Bucks County, I think it was, it's still counting ballots or whatever, that like they need to stop after the Supreme Court rule. I don't know. I'm just happy the election's over. It's not over because they're still counting ballots, but it's over. And you can make of that what you will. I have not seen a mass exodus of people, though. Like, I had seen a lot of people on my Facebook who said they were going to be leaving the country if Harris lost. To my knowledge, they still remain here. Just like many of my Republican friends 4 years ago were ready to, like, light things on fire, but they did not. Perhaps we just live in a very charged society where people say a lot of stupid shit and you have to just kind of let it go and let it wash away. If you're still upset all this time later, you can still be. But I think it's time to move on or try to do something productive. And maybe you can make the change that you want to see in the world. Whoever the hell it was that said that, somebody can let me know. Ford did not like Kamala Harris. He's put a lot of comments here in the thread, in the chat. Let's keep going. Chris Freed asked, because I brought up earlier about the Pittsburgh thing, where I grew up, so in Schuylkill County, you can be a Philly fan and you could be a Pittsburgh fan. Now, I don't know if that's the case anymore, but growing up, you would see houses that would have an Eagles flag and a Steelers flag. And presumably the idea was the Eagles and the Steelers play in different conferences. And so, like, you're not actively rooting for the downfall of your team. The only time that they would ever really meet is maybe once in the regular season or if they had a Keystone State Super Bowl together. And in that case, then you pick your favorite side. Now, in fairness, I probably should have been a Pittsburgh fan, at least as a younger kid, right? Like, I would have gotten to cheer on Mario Lemieux. That would have been pretty cool. I would have gotten to celebrate a bunch of Steelers Super Bowls. That would have been pretty cool. And the Pirates stink. The Phillies are probably the better call. I mean, I went through a lot of pain here as an Eagles fan, as many of you did. Pittsburgh doesn't have a basketball team. Like, for me, it was kind of an easy choice. It was to be a Philly fan. I didn't get as many championships. I could have had the Crosbys and the Malkins. I could have celebrated them, and instead, not so much. Not so much. JH says, whoa, Pittsburgh. I didn't know the public schools were that bad 30 years ago. Yeah. We'll go to Ford here about the Sixers. Paul George, Maxey, Embiid, McCain should be a decent team, but they suck or they don't play due to injuries. That is correct. Sean C. says, love the Sixers. Admittedly, haven't watched them much the last 2 seasons. Can't help but look at their current situation and laugh. Everything from ownership to front office to Embiid himself exudes arrogance. Ford also notes, still need 500 subscribers. We're close. I think we're, 56 away? The drive to 500 is almost complete. So if you haven't done so already, share the show with all your friends and family. Get them to subscribe to the channel. They don't have to watch. I don't care. I mean, I do, but I don't. Get them to subscribe. They get entered to win. Remember, the drive to 500. Once we hit 500, within that week, I will randomly select a name, a subscriber to the channel. That person will win the jersey of their choice, worth up to $175. So if you haven't subscribed yet, by all means you should. If you comment on this show and you haven't subscribed, I have no idea what you're doing in this life. It is absolutely time. Sean C. says, biggest dub of the Sixers season was Marcus Hayes getting stuffed into a locker. All right, we have a lot of stuff going on. I see this. Sean C. says, Pochettino making the U.S. men's national team great again. A breath of fresh air last night. Heck of a game out of the U.S. men's national team. The biggest clip that was going around was the one of Christian Pulisic, the captain, who's had a fantastic season with Milan, scoring a goal, then hitting the Trump dance at the end. And, well, that went about as well as you would expect it to go on the social media. T from the TO3 checks in. All right. I'm going to come back around to other comments here, but we need to get into the meat and potatoes of the show. We're only 16 active minutes in, so this is fine. We had a nice little catch-up. Me, you, all the people. We had a great time. Let's get into what has actually gone wrong. Now, we're going to start with negative. We'll start with the Sixers. We will transition into positive. Positive, of course, is what's happening in Flyers land, sort of. And then maybe we'll even get to touch on the Eagles a little bit. One very quick note for those. Oh, Phantom67 just subscribed to the channel. Phantom67, you're a good person, a great person, maybe the best person I've ever seen. I just got the push notification. Phantom67, you get a special shout out here on the Russ Joy Show this morning. Thank you so much. One really interesting note before we get into all of this, and it comes from the Phillies. We're not going to dive in too much about the Phillies, but it seems like the Phillies are kind of playing around with the idea of pursuing Juan Soto. Now, it seems like for the most part, the Phillies haven't been actively, publicly pursuing him. They had kind of mentioned at some point, I think it was John Middleton, kind of threw out the idea that if the team needs the capital to go out and get another guy, they will. Dave Dombrowski, of course, was on the record at the end of the season saying he doesn't think they need more stars. They have as many stars as any other team in Major League Baseball. But Mark Feinstand said, what was this? I think it was yesterday. Feinstand put out the idea that the Phillies could be the mystery team meeting with Juan Soto at the winter meetings. As of right now, the Yankees, Mets, Blue Jays, and Red Sox are all teams that have reportedly met with Juan Soto. The Dodgers are scheduled to meet with him. The belief seems to be that Juan Soto wants to remain on the East Coast, so that would presumably take the Dodgers out, unless the Dodgers offer him Boku bucks the same way that they did for Shohei Ohtani. I'm not exactly sure that I would want to do that if I were Juan Soto, but maybe he will. There is a possibility that the Giants could be in, but then you still have the same West Coast issue. The Tampa Bay Rays have also been bandied about as potentially being a suitor. But one of them, and this is what Feinstein said, according to sources, other teams that could meet with Soto include the Giants, the Phillies, and the Rays. Tampa would appear to be a long shot, particularly now that the club will be playing home games at Steinbrenner Field in Tampa, Florida, following damage to Tropicana Field roof sustained last month during Hurricane Milton. Buster Olney recently talked about the potential of them moving an Alec Boehm. Does that free up a spot in the lineup? They don't play at the same position, but do the Phillies look at doing more of a roster overhaul? We've seen Boehm's name be floated. We've seen Castellanos' name be floated. We are in a very interesting position right now. We're in a very interesting place if you're a Phillies fan. Juan Soto, if the Phillies were actively engaged, actively involved, sure, it's another big bat. The question, comment, concern, the problem that you're going to continue to run into from now until the end of time is if the bats go cold, none of it matters. Now, if you think that adding another impact bat who's going to somehow be cold resistant, slump resistant is going to help, then great. We'll come back to Juan Soto if and when the Phillies make a move. That was our Phillies blurb of the day. Now let's get into the Sixers because I am disgusted by what the Philadelphia 76ers have put on the court. Now, it is important to kind of note, the idea of putting together a big three is somewhat antiquated at this point. We have now seen multiple instances where putting together a big three doesn't work, and a big reason that a lot of big threes don't end up playing out in the best way, the reason that a lot of big threes don't end up working out is typically because somebody gets hurt, and you don't get to see those three players play together. I'm going to give you some recent examples because it is certainly part of why the Sixers have started off 2-11 to start what was supposed to be a season in which they were going to compete for maybe a top 3 spot in the conference. Remember, all along I have said to each and every one of you, it's been months now, that I don't think the Sixers are gunning for the top spot in the Eastern Conference. They were going to load manage Joel Embiid. They were going to load manage Paul George. The goal was going to be to get them to the playoffs healthy, which is fine, except Paul George hyperextends his knee in the preseason, which costs him a few games to start the season. Joel Embiid is a mess, and the Sixers lied about it. All right? We're going to get the big threes that have been put together in recent years that haven't worked. A big part of it has been because of injuries. Let's kind of go back. There was the Brooklyn big three: James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant missed the season because of the Achilles tear, but he had signed with Brooklyn, but he tore it with Golden State. Harden got hurt. Kyrie had the thing where he believed the earth was flat. Now, he had the wasn't it? It was the COVID thing where he couldn't play at home because he didn't get the vax. So you never really got to see much of Durant, Harden, and Kyrie play together. Then you fast forward to a year ago. James Harden ends up with the Clippers. You almost never get to see James Harden, Paul George, and Kawhi Leonard together. That was supposed to be the next big three. Well, what happened? In each case, in the Brooklyn case, James Harden forced to trade out because he wasn't getting to play with the two guys that he expected to play with. They weren't finding the kind of success that he wanted. Kevin Durant eventually forces his way out of Phoenix, so that big three blows up. Kevin Durant goes off to form a big three with Devin Booker and Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal can't stay healthy. There's another one of these big threes. Okay? So there's another big three that hasn't worked. Harden forces his way to the Sixers. There's really not a big three at that point, right? Because you're if you want to include Tyrese Maxey, he was a young up-and-coming player, but wasn't viewed as being a max-level guy, especially when that team was put together. Tobias Harris. So that wasn't really a big three. But then Harden forces his way out of town, goes to the Clippers, and then again, that didn't work. Paul George eventually opts to leave. And there remain rumors that Harden might not be long for the Clippers either. Oh, and by the way, Kawhi Leonard, no one ever knows when he'll play again, if he'll play again, and even if he does return to the lineup, how long will it be until he's out? Big threes are hard to make work. And in this modern NBA, for whatever reason, there are still teams that actively pursue it. The way that you probably put together a legitimate big three in a meaningful way, most of it is kind of through the draft. The idea of going out and bringing in a bunch of free agents to create a big three like Miami did years ago, like those days are largely gone. Now, you could point to the fact that like Jalen Brunson went up to New York to pair with Julius Randle at the time, but that wasn't a big three. You can make the case that when Dallas traded Kristaps Porzingis to Dallas to pair with Luka Doncic, that they were trying to put together a big three. Do you want to make the case that when Dallas sent Kristaps Porzingis to Boston, that then took Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Kristaps Porzingis and made that a big three? I don't think anybody was really looking at it quite like that. And again, Porzingis got hurt last year. He was the ultimate X factor. Like in a large way, he delivered the championship to Boston a season ago. But that wasn't because they stayed healthy all season and were entirely dominant together as a force the entire season. Big threes, when you put so much into those three players, you end up neglecting the rest of your roster. You lose a lot of depth. You go bargain barrel hunting for players. Now, in fairness, when the Sixers started the year, I said, all right, you're without Paul George, you're without Joel Embiid. Tyrese Maxey's still a very good player. I figured he'd be able to help the Sixers get to a couple of wins, maybe 3 wins in their first 6 games. Play 500 ball until Paul George could come back in, and then you say, all right, Tyrese Maxey and Paul George, along with the rest of this cast and crew, should be able to weather the storm. You should be able to be about a 500 team with those two, with Andre Drummond being a beast on the boards like he was very early in the season, with Gordon playing a specific role, with Kelly Oubre coming back playing the exact same role, with Kyle Lowry coming off the bench as a legitimate, like even though he's far past his prime, backup point guard. I thought that was going to work. Caleb Martin, I figured would kind of be almost a pencil in as a double-double every night. It just hasn't worked, and none of it's worked. And if we're being fair, a big reason that none of this has worked together is because Joel Embiid and his health like really fucked this team. And this team's inability to communicate to the fan base in a clear and transparent manner really screwed things up with their fans. And I was having this conversation last night after the Press Row show, talking to Anthony, because Anthony in his mind, because he doesn't follow the NBA, he's like, well, the Sixers held Joel Embiid out for 10 games because they wanted to keep him healthy. I said, no, that's not what happened. Somewhere along the lines, Joel Embiid got hurt this offseason. Did it happen at the Olympics? Did it happen after the Olympics? He looked pretty bad in Paris, which is why you didn't see him play a lot. He looked plodding. He looked slow. He looked out of shape. He looked like a guy who was being hampered by a knee issue. But then the Sixers said afterwards, like, he is on track. He's going to play. Everything's going to be great. And remember, they kept using the plan as the cover for the process. And they said that he was on track. And then when the Sixers were kind of pushed on, well, if he's on track or is part of the plan, why is he not playing opening night? The NBA does their investigation because, again, shit show at the OK Corral. The Sixers go out and they say, this is all part of the plan. Joel Embiid goes off on his own and says, I'm probably never going to play a back-to-back again in my career. So, yeah. Which then obviously alerts everybody, and everybody gets frustrated. And then you get Shaq and you get Charles Barkley screaming about it. You get Stephen A. Smith and Mad Dog Russo screaming about it. The league does an investigation, and what do they find? They find that the Sixers were fine to keep Joel Embiid out of the lineup, but it was because he was injured. They fined the Sixers $100,000, Shams reported at the time, because they felt like the Sixers' comments publicly about Embiid's health status were very misleading, which means the NBA investigated the Sixers and found Joel Embiid's hurt, and you shouldn't be telling people that it's all part of the plan and he hasn't had a setback. Because somewhere along the lines, this summer, presumably, unless somebody can figure out another way that it could have happened, Joel Embiid got hurt. And they never opened up about it. They never publicly announced that there was a setback. There was never anything reported to the league about there being an actual injury that Joel Embiid had sustained. And so they eroded the confidence of the fan base. So they started off this season that's supposed to be a top 2, top 3 seed in the conference. They started a season that had a lot of excitement. Paul George coming to town. Make of it what you want, but like Andre Drummond coming back to be a legitimate backup. Like all of these things that were supposed to get a fan base excited. Caleb Martin, very nice addition. All these things were supposed to get the fan base excited. They screwed it up before the season even started by lying to the fan base. And now the Sixers are 2-12. Paul George is still trying to find himself. Okay, like you have to be fair to the guy. And I will be fair to Paul George for, let's say, the first 20 games of the season, like his first 20 games. Because he sustained an injury in the preseason, there is a certain amount of ramping up. He wasn't great from the field last night. 1 of 7 from downtown. Where did the 1 come from? Top of the arc, first made basket of the game. He then misses his next 6 3-point attempts. Went 5 of 13 from the field against Miami. He hasn't found his rhythm yet. But he will. I mean, like, this isn't me putting on rose-colored glasses. Like, Paul George will find his game. Paul George, for his career, shoots 44% from the field. Shoots just over 38% from downtown. Averages over 20 points a game. Paul George will be fine. We know what Tyrese Maxey is when he's healthy. It's just unfortunate, and you can see a significant talent gap here when he's not in the lineup. But Tyrese Maxey has the ability to be one of the most electric young guards in the NBA. And if they're both healthy together, they'll be able to right the ship. Your problem is Joel Embiid. I have gone to bat for Joel Embiid as much or more than anyone else. But man, it's really hard. It genuinely is very hard to continue to support what we're seeing. Embiid looks cooked. Now, I'm sure that there will come a stretch in the season where like Joel Embiid's going to be in whatever we want to call better shape, and Embiid's going to look like the guy that we expect him to. But man, Joel Embiid's been bad. He's been genuinely hard to watch. Plays 31 minutes against Miami, 5 of 11 from the field, 11 points. 8 rebounds, woo. 5 assists, woo. Embiid doesn't look right. I think he looks about as bad physically as he's ever looked. Even when we knew he was like nursing a significant knee injury, had the big brace on. Even after he had his face smashed, the orbital bone fracture from Markelle Fultz's shoulder. Like, I think this is the worst he's looked physically going into a season. And the worst part is the Sixers went out of their way this offseason, or Joel Embiid's camp went out of their way this offseason to note that he had lost 15 or 20 pounds, that he was in the best shape of his life. I mean, I feel like I haven't been gaslit this bad since everybody said that, Joe Biden was, running circles around people behind closed doors. Don't get upset. Don't get upset if that were true. He wouldn't have been replaced. Don't go get in your feelings. The Sixers keep trying to tell you that, oh yeah, Joel Embiid, this is going to be the best season of his career. He's locked in. What did we hear? We heard Joel Embiid is not focused on the individual awards. Joel Embiid is not focused on going after hardware for himself anymore. No. Joel Embiid is trying to remain healthy from now until the end of the season because Joel Embiid knows how important it is to be healthy for the postseason. That's the thing that matters the most. What happened, guys? What happened? He got hurt at some point, and we're going to continue to talk about it from now until the time the Sixers admit publicly that they lied, which they won't. So we're going to keep bringing it up. But Embiid got hurt, allegedly lost weight. I don't know. Do you think he looks slimmed down? Does he look svelte? Does he look fleet of foot at this point? Because I don't think so. To me, he looks like we're not quite at like Shaq as a Boston Celtic or Shaq out in Phoenix. The big Shaq. We're not quite there yet, but he looks like shit. And the sooner people kind of like come around to the fact that like this dude's either got to take some time away and legitimately get in shape, or he's got to start playing back-to-backs and get himself in basketball shape. If he looks like this, it doesn't matter what Paul George does. It doesn't matter what Tyrese Maxey does. This version of Joel Embiid is an active negative. He is a legitimate problem for this team. And that sucks because I have been as big of a Joel Embiid guy as could be. But this is just not good. Now, this is kind of where I also hedge a little bit because I was very wrong about Ben Simmons. But there was a time where I said I could see Joel Embiid breaking down in the next few years, and that if Ben Simmons could remain healthy and tighten the screws and kind of get his head back on straight, he'd be the better guy to build around. Unfortunately, Ben Simmons' head did not remain screwed on, and he cannot stay healthy. But Embiid looks really bad. I mean, at least with Ben Simmons, you know he's not going to play. You know that he's going to take up money on your cap, but you know that you have to build around him not being there. With Embiid, you have no idea. You have to just hope that on any given night he's feeling up to playing. It's just not good. I'm going to go over to the comments here. Jim Cochran says, I know they're not healthy, but the troubling part is they're not really competitive in most games. Is it time to talk about the coach? I don't know. Here's the thing. A lot of times we dive into the idea of replacing a head coach. And in some cases, I go yeah, that's fine. We can have the conversation. I think Nick Nurse is a really good coach. I don't like, and I've outlined on the show, I don't like the way that Nick Nurse has gone about answering questions around the health of Joel Embiid and even Paul George. I think it was kind of a bitch move. I think it was the same kind of bitch move as what we saw from James Franklin, evading questions. I'm not a big fan of how they've gone at it. I'm not a big fan of how Nick Nurse has spoken to the media about the injury situations. But I think he's a good coach. I can't look at it and say that you're going to replace Nick Nurse with somebody who's going to light a fire. Again, none of it matters if Joel Embiid isn't healthy. Is there a head coach on the market right now that's going to be able to somehow divine intervention their way into getting Joel Embiid healthy? Because if the answer is no, you don't make a change at head coach. The only way that you do is if the locker room makes it very publicly known that they've given up on the coach. But why would they? I think that this is just a talent disparity thing. This team's success is largely predicated on Joel Embiid being able to be at least 75%, and he's anything but. That's why it's not working. It has nothing to do with anything else. If you could get Tyrese Maxey and Paul George playing together healthy, I do think it's a 500 team. Maybe it's even a little bit better than 500. You're probably in the mix for the 5th or 6th seed in the conference. Joel Embiid's supposed to be the thing that takes you up into the top 2, the top 3, maybe the top 4. But he's not even close. It's actually, in a way, I think it's maybe the most deflating season that I can remember for the Sixers in a long time. Even if you go back to process era Sixers teams, they at least played hard. What we're seeing, this lackadaisical play where they don't really look locked in, this is what we saw early in the season from the Flyers when there were questions about whether or not the Flyers were tuning out John Tortorella. Now they tuned back in. He's playing, or their team is now playing better. If Embiid can find some form of himself, and if he can get into shape, which again is a big if and a big, why do we have to have this conversation every time? If he's able to get healthy, then all of a sudden the Sixers are a legitimate contender again. Without him, and without Maxey in the lineup, I don't think this team is built well enough to have Paul George be your number one option and have some combination of Kyle Lowry and Jared McCain as your point guard? No, that doesn't work. Andrew Fawcett says, here's an idea. How about 5 players who can actually play together? Nope. Can't have that. That's incredible. That's absurd. You can't do that. Chris Freed says, since this is the week before Thanksgiving, do you get to visit the Axeman first? Neptune from Villanova or Nurse from the Sixers? Well, Neptune has been an absolute disaster for Villanova. Horrifically bad. All-time bad hire. It was one thing to lose Jay Wright. It was another thing to replace him with somebody who just has no idea what's going on. You can make the case that NIL has fundamentally changed a lot, but I think it was just the loss of Jay Wright. Neptune's been awful. I don't think they're going to fire him. They should have done it by now. I don't think Nurse is getting fired either. If you're being fair here, if you're Daryl Morey and you look at the team that you constructed, Tyrese Maxey's out. He's kind of the guy that's the heart and soul of your team. He's out. Paul George is still trying to find his rhythm after getting hurt in the preseason. Joel Embiid's a mess. I don't know how you blame it on the head coach. And I don't even think it's a roster construction thing either, by the way. I don't think the Sixers could have done something better in the offseason. I think they actually had a pretty decent offseason. I think they did a pretty good job of constructing a roster that should be able to be a 500 team. And yet, not good. Joe Papel says none of this is a surprise. Ford notes that he said this when Embiid played in the Olympics. This would happen during the start of the Sixers season. Says, I think anyone who follows the team knew it would. We had this conversation. We did. We legitimately did. There were a lot of concerns about having Joel Embiid play at the Olympics. I will point out, the reason I don't think Embiid was hurt at the Olympics is because the men's basketball, like U.S. basketball, sent Kawhi Leonard home. Kawhi made the team, and they sent him home because he was hurt. They're like, there's no way you're going to play. Like, go home. Go home, Flash. So they sent Kawhi Leonard back, and the Clippers were like, well, I guess Kawhi's coming home. If Joel Embiid had been hurt at the Olympics or hurt in the camp leading up to the Olympics, they would have sent him home. U.S. basketball would have had to send him home. You're not just like keeping an injured guy on the roster just to have him play against Jokic. And if that's what they did, and they somehow covered up an injury being sustained there, then by all means. It just seems like he got hurt sometime after. Ford says, Russ, how do you think they finish? What's the regular season record after 82 games? I don't know. Let's assume Maxey gets back healthy. I think they're in line for like the 6th seed. I know there are people who think that they're going to miss the playoffs. They're not going to. I mean, the only way that they don't make the playoffs is if Maxey is out for like the season. Otherwise, I think that he is enough. Some combination of Paul George and Joel Embiid are enough. They'll play around 500 basketball. They'll get some stretches where those three will get to play together and go on a nice little run. So they'll get above 500. I think they're probably like in line for the 6th seed right now. I think the team is too good from a talent perspective when everybody's together for them to miss the playoffs. They're certainly not going to have the number 1 pick. Like, I don't see a scenario where they end up in the lottery. I really don't. So, like, let's say they play. Let me think. 41-41 is 500. Let's say they go 45-37. Seems about right now. I'd say 45-37, somewhere around there. Take a look at last year's standings and let me know if that's 6th seed. But that's where I think they're at right now. Now, if they get healthy, if Maxey comes back, if Paul George is able to stay relatively healthy, and Joel Embiid comes back to playing some version of the Joel Embiid game that we expect, they could go on a run. You have to remember the Eastern Conference isn't like rife with amazing teams. Like Cleveland is a weird case. Cleveland had such an absurd start to the season, and I can't explain to you why they're 15-0. I have no idea. I don't think that Cleveland team is a 15-0 team. I mean, they are. They've earned their wins. I can't explain to you why they're 15-0. We know that Boston is a really good team. They could sleepwalk through the season and still end up in the Eastern Conference Finals. Orlando's an intriguing team. The Knicks have gone through some pains, but Karl Anthony Towns looks better with the Knicks than he did at many points. I'm just trying to double check I'm not missing something here. I think that was it. Yeah. Let me see. No, we're good. I just got a notification I was very confused by. We're good. I think the Sixers are probably in that 6th seed mix. We'll see if it comes to pass. Now, I said we're going to talk about the Flyers. So I want to get to that before we have to head out, because I have a meeting coming up very soon. Alexei Kolosov got the start last night. As JH called him earlier in the show, Sexy Alexei. Alexei Kolosov had a good enough performance last night to keep the Flyers in a game against a very talented Colorado Avalanche team. Now, Kolosov had not had the greatest start to the season. And in fairness, he wasn't expected to get much of a run at all to start the season. You go back to the offseason, you go back to him going back to Belarus, and there were the questions, comments, and concerns about whether or not he really wanted to be here, all that stuff. If you put that aside for a second, the big news for the Flyers was that Kolosov maybe wanted to know that he had a shot to get to play some games at the NHL level. There were questions about whether or not he got sent to the AHL, if he was going to stay there the entire season, or if he was going to try to somehow strong-arm his way back to the KHL. To this point, Kolosov has played 4 games now. In the first 3, he had like a .393 goals against average. Not fantastic, but we also have to remember part of why he was thrust into the lineup was because of injuries to Sam Ersson, and also because Ivan Fedotov looked horrific. So when Cam York went on IR, they brought Kolosov up. I think that was the order of operations. They brought Kolosov up. He got some starts. Fedotov, who started the season horrifically, over his last 3 games has had a goals against average of around like 2.2. So Fedotov all of a sudden has kind of like established himself as the best option with Sam Ersson out. And so then you look back at Kolosov and you say, all right, like how do you make both of these guys happy? You're going to try to mix them both into the lineup, and they have a bunch of games coming up here. So Kolosov gets the start last night, gives up 3 goals. It was not the worst performance of the season for him. Again, this Avalanche team, they're just over 500. That win last night took them to 10-9 on the season. Colorado is still a very good team. Now, Landeskog is out, but that Colorado team is a skilled team, and any team that has Nathan MacKinnon on any given night is going to have the chance to win a hockey game. So that ended up being what I would consider a good performance. I think when you have what is supposed to be your third string goalie in Alexei Kolosov, he goes and only gives up 3, keeps you in that game, and the Flyers fought back in the third period. That last, 15 minutes or so of the third period, they looked like a much more cohesive unit. They punched across 2 goals. You had a Tippett goal. You had a Forster goal. They at least don't give up. And I think as like the Flyers continue this season and people like me want to see the bottom fall out so they can get a high draft pick and add elite talent to pair with Matvei Michkov, if the Flyers have a bunch of games where they look kind of for a good chunk of it, but then in the third period they fight back and they claw back, or you get games where they go down by 2, but they claw 1 back, they give up another, but then they claw back, and they lose these games by 1 or 2 goals, but they look competitive throughout, that's what you should be looking for as a Flyers fan. So Kolosov had a good enough start last night. Fedotov, though, is the one that's like worth keeping the eye on. Like, there are a lot of conflicting thoughts among media. There are a lot of conflicting thoughts around people around the league about whether or not the Flyers set a bad precedent by having Kolosov like even potentially in the mix to get a look because of what happened in the offseason. I will tell you, Ivan Fedotov to me is the one that absolutely just I am so back in on Ivan Fedotov. I will remind people that a few years ago when the Flyers signed him to a contract and they took the picture where he had the Flyers cap on, and then all of a sudden one day from practice he gets picked up by an unmarked van and he goes off to do his voluntary year of military service. At that time, there were people within the Flyers organization who thought that if Fedotov came over, he would push Carter Hart for playing time. Not that he was going to usurp Carter Hart, but he was going to push him for time. That instead of like a 70-30 split, you might have seen a 60-40 split. Maybe not quite a 55-45, but like there were believers in the organization that Fedotov could have been that good. Now keep in mind, we're a few years past that. He's not a young prospect anymore. It's like, I think he's 27. So he's not like 22 or whatever, 23 like Kolosov is. So you look at it and you say, like, the runway isn't necessarily there. If Fedotov plays really well, you have not a conundrum, but you have definitely something on your hands that could maybe be a trade chip. Do I see a scenario where the Flyers get really good goaltending out of Ivan Fedotov and trade him at this year's deadline? Probably not. I think it's more likely that they would deal him in the offseason. But just organizationally, they have stocked this organization with a ton of goalie prospects. And the most interesting name is Zavragan, who has played lights out in the KHL at 19 years of age. So, like, they seem to kind of have a pipeline. It would be very interesting to see what they do, especially if Fedotov plays well. Now, if Ersson comes back and Fedotov's still playing well, they could send Kolosov back down. He might not like that, and if he forces his way back out or he refuses to play, well, then you've lost an asset. Based on what we've seen at the NHL level so far, I don't know if it's a huge loss, and knowing what you have coming, I don't know if it's a huge loss. Perhaps the Flyers then look to trade a Kolosov. There are always teams looking for young goalies. He's on an affordable deal. Maybe it makes sense. But like they've benefited once again from really strong goaltending of late. That's the thing that made that Flyers team last year such a shock in the start of the season, is that Carter Hart and Sam Ersson played incredibly well together. They played incredibly well in net. It didn't feel like there was much of a drop-off from your starter to your backup. The Flyers didn't have that to start this season. Sam Ersson has played very well. Fedotov was horrific at the start of the year. You have this mix of Fedotov and Kolosov until Ersson comes back. If they get the same kind of goaltending that they've been getting from those two, all of a sudden, this Flyers team that I still don't think is particularly good If you get elite goaltending, or at least in the case of Kolosov last night, goaltending that's good enough to hold the opposition to 3 goals, I don't know, you can win a lot of these games. You can figure out a way to punch across a couple of goals. You can at least figure out a way to force OT and to still pick up the loser point. We will see what happens with the Flyers. We'll monitor the situation, and we will be talking about it on this show. Now, I do have to go. I want to thank everybody who joined me live here on the Russ Joy Show YouTube channel. If you watched over on the Joy Media channel, that's fine as well. Do me a favor, like the video, share the video, subscribe, and if you watched live, go into the regular comments section. Let me know about something you agree with, something you disagree with, whatever it is, your favorite part of the show, something that you didn't like, you think that I'm a buffoon, you don't like that the show started late, let me know in the comments. It's good for the algorithm, so I appreciate it. And if you haven't done so already, go over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Pandora, wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to The Russ Joy Show. I greatly appreciate it. Remember the drive to 500. When we get to 500 subscribers, one lucky winner, randomly selected, will win the jersey of their choice worth up to $175. I will talk to all of you Friday morning here on The Russ Joy Show, and at some point this week over on Snow the Goalie, Wednesday night, the Press Row Show. You can find us in the balcony level by the organ. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to all of you very soon.